The day Armand moved the rusty container to the edge of town, the air was warm and dusty. A tow truck pulled slowly down the narrow road, and the giant metal box rolled behind it like a stubborn animal. The paint on the container was faded and peeling. Patches of brown rust showed on the sides like old scars. People came out to look. Some crossed their arms, some shook their heads. A few laughed softly in a way they thought he could not hear. Armand heard them, but he kept his eyes on the ground and then on his small plot of land, where the driver was lowering the container with care. The plot was not big. It sat beside a thin line of trees and a ditch that carried rainwater in the wet season. A few wild flowers had pushed up through dry grass. Beyond the trees, he could see the roofs of small houses and a bright blue water tank on a tall stand. On the other side was a chain-link fence with a broken gate. It was not much, but it was his. He had the paper to prove it. He had saved for this small piece of earth, even while money was tight and days were long. He paid the tow truck driver, thanked him twice, and stood alone with the container. He put his hand on the metal wall. The sun had warmed it, and it felt like a hot stove. He took a slow breath and smiled at the silly thought. He was about to move into a hot stove. He laughed at himself in a soft way. Then he set down his backpack and pulled out his notebook, the one with pencil marks and little drawings. He had spent many nights drawing plans. A bed nook here, a small sink there, a fold-out table near the window that he would cut, lights along the ceiling, airflow from front to back. He had measured and measured again because he was an electrician, and he knew that good plans saved both time and money. He had not always planned to live like this, but life had changed. When his mother fell ill, he paid the bills he could, and he stayed with her in the hospital when he was free. He watched the numbers grow on the paper from the hospital office. He used his savings to help her. He did not regret it. He would never regret it. After she got better, there was little money left. He left his old apartment. He sold his sofa and his heavy table. He kept his tools and his notebook. When he found the container at a shipping yard, it was the cheapest thing that was still safe and strong. He saw it and thought, I can make this into a home. He unhooked the lock and pulled the heavy doors open. The air inside was still and close. It smelled like old metal, dust, and a hint of salt. Light pushed in from the doorway and made a bright rectangle on the floor. The space felt bigger than it looked from outside, but it also felt empty and unfriendly. He took off his shoes and walked inside. The floor was rough. The walls had marks and lines where crates and boxes had once pressed against them. He could hear the faint sound of birds outside and a car far away, but inside it felt like another world. He took out a tape measure and began to mark the floor with chalk. 2 steps for the bed corner, 1 for a little shelf, a narrow lane that would be his path from door to kitchen to bed to door again. He spoke numbers under his breath and made small ticks with the chalk. He moved slowly, carefully, as if the chalk marks were already wood and fabric and light. At noon, the heat inside grew strong. It felt like a closed car in summer. His shirt stuck to his back. He stepped outside, wiped his face with a cloth, and looked around. On the sidewalk, 2 school children walked past and looked up at the container. One pointed, the other giggled, then stopped when she saw Armand watching. He raised a hand and smiled. The children hurried away. A man from a nearby house leaned on his porch rail and called to a friend, loud enough for the joke to fly across the street. Armand did not listen to the words. He looked at the trees instead and watched a leaf fall, turning slowly in the air. He knew what the first problem was. It pressed against him like the heat itself. Without insulation, the container would burn in the day and chill in the night. He had known this in his mind before. Now his skin knew it too. He sat in the thin shade of a tree and opened the notebook again. He drew a simple wall. He wrote, foam, vapor barrier, wood panel. He drew a roof line. He wrote, "Seal seams, add vent, slope for rain." He touched his pocket and felt the small weight of his money. Not much. Every purchase would need a reason. Every mistake would cost more than he could spare. In the afternoon, he walked to the hardware store at the corner. The bell rang when he opened the door. The air inside was cool. Rows of tools and boxes lined the walls. He went slowly, reading labels, checking prices. He picked up a small rust treatment kit and put it in his basket. He added sandpaper. He stood in front of the insulation aisle for a long time. The good foam was not cheap. He did the math in his head and then did the math again. He found a stack of clearance boards with small dents. He tested one by pressing on it. Still strong. He smiled and placed 3 boards in the basket. This was how he would build, piece by piece, careful and kind to the wallet. At the counter, the clerk looked at him and then at the list. "Big project?" she asked. Her tone was not sharp. It had a soft note, like a friend's voice. "A small one," he said, "but important to me." "First job?" she asked. He shook his head. "First home." She nodded, as if she understood. Something in that. She put the items in a firm paper bag and wished him luck. He carried the bag back to the container, feeling both the weight and the hope inside it. The sun sat lower when he reached his plot. The metal walls had cooled a little. He set the bag inside near the door and pulled on work gloves. He mixed the rust treatment and began to brush it onto the worst spots. The liquid left dark, wet circles where it touched the metal. He moved his hand in slow, even strokes. The work was simple, and it calmed him. He thought of his mother's hands making tea, the way she used to move with care, with no rush, even when time was short. He was not in a rush now. He just had to begin. Beginning was the hardest part. After that, it was only one step after another. As evening came, the street grew quiet. The same man who had called out jokes earlier now walked his dog. He slowed as he passed the open door. He looked inside, saw the dark metal walls, the bag of tools, and the chalk marks. He paused as if he wanted to say something, then nodded once and kept walking. Armin watched him go. He hoped the man would come back one day when the walls were warm and the lights were soft. He made a simple meal on a small camping stove just outside the door. Rice, beans, and tea. He ate on an upturned crate and wrote in his notebook between bites. He made a list for the next day. Finish rust treatment, sand the rough floor spots, plan window cut, check secondhand shop for a fan. He added a note under the list. Remember why you chose this. Safe, low cost, your own. That night he slept inside the container for the first time. He rolled out a thin mat and a blanket near the door, where the air was better. He listened. To the wind move the leaves. He listened to a few steps on the walk outside, then to the quiet that fell. The metal ticked softly as it cooled. He thought of heat and cold, of insulation and vents. He thought of the first window. He smiled at the idea of sunlight reaching the far wall like a hand. In the middle of the night, he woke. The air had turned cool and then cold. He pulled the blanket around his shoulders and tucked it under his chin. The metal walls held the night like a bowl. He could see a little moonlight near the door, but most of the space was dark. He remembered the warm noon and compared it to this chill. The container had no middle. It jumped from one side to the other, too hot, too cold. He whispered a promise to himself. He would fix this. He would make a steady middle. He closed his eyes, and after a time, he slept again. Morning came in pale shades. Birds called. A light breeze lifted the edge of his blanket. He stood, stretched, and stepped outside to wash his face with cool water from a jug. He made tea and watched steam rise in the thin morning sun. The road was quiet. but a few faces appeared, moving slowly past. The same man with the dog, a woman with a bag of bread, the two children from the day before. The children slowed, curious. He waved. After a small pause, they waved back. The woman with bread smiled and said, "Good morning," and he said the same. He set the tea down and took up the brush and the sandpaper. He worked on the rust again. He worked on the floor. He paused to drink water. He moved his hands with patience. As the day warmed, the heat grew again, but he kept on. He took breaks in the shade of the tree and wrote in his notebook. He drew a simple fan that would pull air through in the afternoon. He drew a window frame. He wrote a short note to himself. Cut straight. Measure twice. By noon, the container was hot again. He stood inside and felt the heavy air. He stepped out and sat beneath the tree. He looked at the metal wall and saw his own reflection, faint and wavy. He did not see a joke. He did not see a mess. He saw a start. He saw a place where he could build something clean and safe. He would do it properly. He would take time to learn what he did not know. He would ask for help when needed. He would be careful with wires, careful with water, careful with heat and cold. A car slowed near the curb. A driver leaned out and called, "You really living in that thing?" His voice had no sharp edge, only surprise. "For now," Armand said. "I will make it better." The driver nodded. "Well, good luck." The car rolled on. Armand stood and touched the warm metal, then pulled his hand away with a little laugh. "I hear you," he said to the morning light came soft and silver, and Armand woke with a clear plan. Today, he would open the metal box to the sky. He would make a window. He ate a simple breakfast and drew a rectangle on the wall with pale chalk. He measured the sides again and again. He wrote small numbers in the corners. He stood back and pictured sunlight falling on a wooden shelf and a small green plant. He felt a wave of calm. This was the picture that had carried him through long days. A clean square of light on warm wood. He set up his tools in a neat line. Near the door, he put on his gloves, glasses, and a cloth mask. He checked the blade on his old jigsaw and tested the switch. The motor hummed, a soft promise. He breathed once more and pressed the blade against the chalk line. The metal vibrated. The sound was sharp and steady. He followed the line as best he could. The first few centimeters were slow, but clean. Then the blade began to wander. The metal wall flexed slightly, and the jigsaw chattered. He stopped, wiped his forehead, and tried again. He moved with more pressure, thinking it might help. The blade bent, bit, and then, with a quick ping, snapped. He stood still for a second, surprised. The broken blade hung at an angle, and the cut looked like a wavering river instead of a straight road. He set the jigsaw down and took a step back. The air felt heavy. He could already hear in his mind what the neighbors might say. He did not want to give them more reason to laugh. He reached for a file to smooth the edge, but he knew this would not fix a crooked cut. He needed the right tool and the right method, not just his will. He folded the extension cord into a coil and locked it inside. Then he walked to the hardware store again, this time with more questions than money. He waited behind two customers and studied a small display of cutting wheels. The clerk he had met yesterday looked up and smiled in a kind way. "Back so soon?" she asked. "I tried to cut a window," he said. "My blade broke. The cut is not straight." "You'll want the right blade for steel," she said, pointing to a heavy-duty pack. "And if you can, clamp a straight guide to the wall. It keeps the tool honest. A grinder with a cutting wheel might be better for long lines." He looked at prices and did the math again. The good blades were not cheap. The grinder and wheels together were more than he had planned to spend today. He placed the blades in one hand, then the wheels in the other. He thought about time versus money. He thought about safety. He chose the grinder and two wheels because a clean cut now would save trouble later. He added 2 small clamps from the clearance bin with missing paint. He thanked the clerk, and she wished him steady hands. Back at the container, he marked the chalk lines again and clamped a straight piece of scrap metal he had found by the fence. He pulled on his gear. The grinder woke with a bright sound. Sparks flew in a thin line and fell away like tiny stars. The cut was louder than the jigsaw and drew eyes. A man across the street stood with his arms folded. A woman lifted her phone and filmed for a moment. 2 kids watched from behind a tree, wide-eyed. Armin kept his focus on the line, following the guide. He paused every few seconds to cool the wheel and check the path. A voice called from the sidewalk, not mean, but not friendly either. "Hey, that noise! How long is this going to go on?" It was the same man who had joked on the first day. His dog tugged on the leash, bored of standing still. "Only for a short time," Armand said, lifting the grinder away. "I'm making a window. Please keep it quick," the man said. "Some of us work nights." "I understand," Armand said. "I will do my best." He turned back to the wall and made the last cut. The metal rectangle came loose with a soft crack and a lean. He supported it with one hand and set it down inside. The hole in the wall filled the container with a new feeling. Air moved. Light fell across the floor and broke into bright shapes. Even unfinished, it was beautiful. He smiled, small and private, then looked at the edge. The line was straighter now, but one corner dipped. His first attempt showed. He filed the rough places and told himself that trim could hide the small mistake later. The afternoon brought a new visitor, a man in a light blue shirt with a badge from the municipal office. He arrived because someone had called to ask about permits and noise. He stood at the door, polite but careful. "Are you the owner?" he asked. "Yes," Armand said, and he showed the paper with his name and the lot number. "You're doing construction?" "I'm making a safe home," Armand said. "I plan to keep the wiring clean, add insulation, and manage water. I will follow the rules. I'm an electrician." The man nodded slowly. "We have guidelines," he said. "Windows and doors should meet size rules. You need proper ventilation and fire safety. Also, drainage for rain is important. Do you have a plan to show us?" "I am drawing one," Armand said. He held up his notebook. It was neat but humble. The man read a few notes and looked at the chalk lines. He did not frown. He did not smile. He seemed to weigh the effort against the rules in his head. "You will need to come to the office," the man said. "Bring your plan. Ask for a small structure. Review. It may take time. There are fees." "Of course," Armand said. "I will come tomorrow morning." "Keep noise in daylight hours," the man added, glancing toward the houses. "And be careful with tools." "I will," Armand said. After the man left, Armand felt a tightness in his chest, not from fear exactly, but from the size of the work. He had tried to do one simple thing, and it had opened a door to 10 other things: rules, fees, guides, drainage, vents. He sat on the step and drank water. The new window opening framed a soft piece of sky. He watched a cloud sail across it, and felt the tightness ease a little. One step at a time. He would not rush. He would do it right. He spent the last light of day cleaning the floor and sweeping metal dust into a bin. He set the cutout panel aside. It was heavy, but still useful. He might turn it into a shelf with a strong bracket, he thought. He wrote notes for the morning: office visit, forms, fee estimate, ask about ventilation size, ask about exit requirements. He added, "Be kind, listen more than you speak." This small rule had helped him again and again in his work life. Night. Settled. He ran the fan in the door to pull cool air across the floor. He locked his tools, checked the extension cord, and pulled the door closed with a solid click. In the quiet, he made a simple dinner and then called his mother to check in. She asked if he was eating well and sleeping enough. He said yes to both because she worried and because he wanted to keep her calm. He told her about the window and she laughed softly. "You always liked light," she said. "Even as a child, you moved your chair to a sunny spot." He smiled at the memory. He slept well that night, tired from effort and soothed by the new breath of air through the opening. In the morning, he washed, dressed, and carried his notebook to the municipal office. The building was clean and busy. People stood in small lines and held folders. Armand took a number and waited on a wooden chair. He read a sign that listed steps for small building permits. It was clear and also slightly heavy. He repeated to himself, "One step at a time." When his number came, he spoke with a woman at the desk. She asked simple questions and entered answers into a computer. "You'll need a sketch with measurements," she said. "Show the exits, the size of windows, the wiring plan, and how you will manage rainwater. There is a small fee for review, and we may ask for a site visit." He thanked her and paid the fee with careful hands. The amount was not large, but it cut into his next purchase. He left with a tidy packet and a list of what to draw. Outside, he sat on a bench and added details to his notebook. He sketched a small sloped gutter for the roof. He drew a vent near, the ceiling and a path for fresh air low on the opposite wall. He marked the circuit for lights and outlets with a main shutoff within reach of the door. He kept things simple and safe. On the walk home, he stopped by a salvage yard he had seen from the bus. It sat behind a low fence, filled with old doors, windows, and stacks of wood. He greeted the owner, a woman with sharp eyes and kind hands. He asked about small windows with solid frames. She showed him a pair of used windows with clear glass and no cracks. The frames had scratches, but the wood was strong. The price was fair. He counted his cash and found he could buy one today and one next week. He chose the best one and carried it back like a careful secret. When he reached the container, he found a small surprise. The extension cord he had coiled and locked was gone. The lock on the small toolbox was still there, but the cord had been pulled free from an outlet near the fence, where he had forgotten to secure it. It was not a large loss, but it hurt, because it felt like a crack in trust. He stood for a long moment with his hand on the door, quiet in his head. Then he breathed out, unlocked the box, and checked the rest. Everything else was there. He wrote a simple rule on a piece of tape and stuck it to the inside of the door. Lock everything, every time. He needed power to cut, so he walked back to the hardware store and bought a shorter, cheaper cord to use just for the day. He saved the receipt in his notebook. When he returned, he set the new window into the opening to test the fit. The corner where his first cut had dipped was visible. He leveled the frame with shims and looked at the line. Trim would make it right. He felt better. He was learning as he went. He held the window in place for a long minute, just to see the room with glass and blue sky. The world outside looked soft through it, like a quiet. The morning after he covered the new window opening with plastic, Armand woke with a steady feeling in his chest. The room was still a metal box, but the square of light he had cut yesterday had changed the air. It proved something to him. A clear picture in his head could become a real edge and a real view. He made tea, rolled up his sleeves, and checked the chalk lines he had left on the wall. He would clean the cut, build a simple frame, and test fit the used window again. He hummed a few notes from an old song his mother liked, then laughed at himself and got to work. A soft voice came from the doorway. "Good morning. That cut is not bad," the voice said. "But your corner, see how it dips? Trim will hide it, but the frame will thank you if the lines are true." Armand turned. An older man stood there with bright eyes and a cap with a faded logo. He held a paper bag and a square metal tool. "I am Bhati," he said. "I used to be a carpenter. I live 2 streets down. I walk past every day." Armand wiped his hands and smiled. "I am Armand," he said. "You are right about the corner. It was my first try. The blade broke." "It happens," Mr. Bhati said, stepping. inside in a careful way, asking without words if it was all right to come in. Armin nodded him in. "Do you mind if I show you a small trick?" The older man asked. "Please," Armin said. Mr. Bhatti placed his square against the edge and marked a clean line past the crooked corner. "Clamp a straight guide here," he said, tapping the mark. "Then use your grinder just to kiss this edge and bring it back. Don't force it. Let the wheel do the work. And put tape along the paint to keep tears small." They worked side by side. The older man's hands moved slow and sure, the way trained hands do. He spoke in short, simple lines. "Measure once, then a second time with a different tool," he said, holding the square and then a tape. "When they match, your mind rests." When the cut was done, the window opening looked clean. The crooked corner had become a true one. Even the plastic sheet sat neater. Armand felt a quiet joy that showed on his face. "You have good patience," Mr. Bhatti said. He set the paper bag on the crate. "My wife made samosas. Please take 2. We brought extra by mistake," he said, though his eyes said it was on purpose. Armand thanked him. The food was warm and soft with a gentle spice. It tasted like a friendly door opening. They walked around the container together. Armand showed his notebook. He explained his plan for insulation, a vapor barrier, and wood panels inside. He showed the drawing for a small, sloped gutter on the roof and a simple vent near the ceiling. Mr. Bhatti nodded. "This is good. Keep it simple and safe," he said. Then he pointed to the narrow length of floor along one wall. "Here you can make a bench with storage under the seat," he said. "It will hold tools and blankets and also be a place to sit and tie your shoes. And a drop-leaf table on a hinge will be your friend. It hides when you need space and opens when you eat or work." Armand had drawn a fold-out table, but not the bench. He added the bench to the notebook, drawing boxes under a long seat. "Thank you," he said. "I also need strong wood. The big store is expensive." "There is a salvage yard near the Yai train line," Mr. Bhatti said. "Reclaimed wood is honest wood. It has already proven it can live. If you choose with care, it will look beautiful too. I am going there now to look for a door for a friend. Would you like to come?" They walked, together under a mild sun. The salvage yard smelled like wood dust and old rain. Stacks of planks leaned against a wall. A row of used windows gleamed in a shy way. Doors stood in a row like tall people waiting for a bus. The owner waved when she saw Armin and Mr. Bhatti. "Back again?" she asked with a smile. "This time with a guide?" "A teacher," Armin said, and the woman nodded as if this explained everything. They tested boards by sight and by hand. Mr. Bhatti showed him how to look for straight grain and how to avoid twisted pieces. "Sight down the edge," he said, holding a board at eye level. "See if it smiles or frowns. You want the quiet ones." They found a small stack of reclaimed cedar, warm in color and light in weight. It would make kind walls. They found a narrow, strong window for the far end, and a used, solid door with a good latch that could be cleaned and oiled. At the back of the yard, near a shelf of odd parts, Armin saw a small skylight dome from an old camper. It had a frame, clear plastic, and a hinge that still moved. He lifted it and held it to the light. He felt the thought rise quickly. A square of sky above the bed nook would bring morning sun and gentle stars. He checked the hinge and the gasket. With new sealant and careful screws, it could be safe and dry. The owner gave him a fair price. He counted his money and saw he could buy the skylight, the cedar planks, and one door if he put off another purchase for a week. He chose the skylight and the cedar now, and the owner set the door aside with his name on it. "I will hold it for 7 days," she said. "No rush, but don't forget me." On the walk back, Mr. Bhatti spoke about cutting a clean hole in the roof for the skylight. "You will need to make a frame to give the roof more strength," he said. "Use butyl tape and a bead of sealant under the flange. Then a simple flashing around. Work on a dry day. Have cloth ready to cover in case clouds trick you. I will watch the weather, Armand said, and I will check the rules for roof openings. Good, Mr. Body said. Rules are also a kind of frame. Back at the container, they laid the cedar planks inside. The wood made the air smell like a small forest. The space already felt kinder. The two kids who had watched before came to the doorway again. What is that smell? One asked. Cedar, Armand said. It is wood for the walls. It smells nice, the other said, and they both smiled. Armand felt the space share, its hope. That afternoon, Armand returned to his notebook with a stronger hand. He made a clean drawing of the interior with measures. He marked the bench, the fold-out table, the bed nook, the bookshelf, and a narrow rail for hanging coats. He drew the skylight and the high and low vents. He traced the wiring plan with care. A main breaker box, a ground rod, grounded outlets, a ground fault outlet near the sink, a switch for lights in 2 places so he could turn them off from the bed and the door. He added smoke and gas alarms. His lines looked steady. The next morning, he went back to the municipal office. He wore a clean shirt and carried his notebook and a neat sheet of drawings he had copied. The woman at the desk looked at his plan with calm eyes. She called a colleague from a small office area. A man with a helpful face joined them. You have thought this through, the man said, tapping the drawing of the vent. Good. The key things are ventilation, safe exits, and rainwater. Your exit door must open fully without things in the way. A bedroom area needs an egress window of a certain size, or a door right there. Your skylight is fine if it is tempered or properly protected and sealed well. Add your gutter to a small barrel with a screen to keep insects out, and use proper pipe for a drain away from the foundation. What about a small solar panel? Armand asked. I hope to add 1 panel and a battery later for lights and a fan. I want to plan now. Planning is wise, the woman said. Show a separate, low-voltage circuit if you like, but keep it clear and safe, and make sure your system has a proper shutoff and fuses. We like simple and safe, too. She smiled. There was a short silence as they reviewed the fee table and the timing. Then the man said, We can give you a conditional approval today based on this plan, with a site visit in 1 week. If the site shows you are following the plan and using proper materials, we will issue the full approval after small adjustments, if any. Armand felt pressure leave his shoulders like air leaving a balloon, but in a good way. He thanked them, with care. He paid the fee and left with a paper that said, Conditional approval at the top in firm letters. He read it twice on the sidewalk and then once more on the bench outside. The paper listed clear conditions: keep clear exits, use ground fault protection near water, install detectors, add roof drainage, seal roof openings, and manage propane outdoors with a vented line if he used a small cooking tank. The list felt like a map. He was good with maps. When he reached his plot, he showed the paper to the night shift neighbor who happened to be walking by. The man read the words and grinned. You did it right, he said. That is good to see. He offered to hold a board later in the week if Armand needed a second pair of hands. I am off on Thursday, he said. I can spare an hour. Armand thanked him. The help felt like a door opening in a wall he had thought was solid. He hung the paper inside the door where he could see it and remember the path. The rest of that day became a design day. He did not cut or sand. Instead, he learned. Mr. Body came by with a small gift, an old set of chisels and a wooden plane wrapped in a cloth. They are not new, he said, but they are honest. Keep them sharp, and they will tell you what to do. He showed Armand how to sharpen a chisel on a simple stone, how to feel for the burr, and how to wipe tools with a little oil to keep rust away. They made a tiny shelf together, just 2 boards joined in a T-shape for spices. It was nothing grand, But when they fixed it to a scrap of wall and set a small jar on it, the room changed. A shelf is a promise that useful things will have a place. In the evening, Armin cut pieces of cardboard and tape to make a full-size mock-up of the fold-out table. He pivoted it up and down, pretending to eat, then work, then tuck it away. He timed how long it took to open and close with "oh." The sky was clear when Armin woke, and the air felt light, as if the day itself was giving him a kind nod. He checked the weather on a small radio he kept near the door. "No rain for 2 days," the voice said. It was the chance he needed. He set a simple goal: frame the window, begin insulation on one long wall, and if time allowed, cut for the skylight and seal it before evening. He ate a quick breakfast, tied his hair back, and laid out his tools in a neat row. When he worked, in a calm, ordered way, his mind stayed calm, too. He started with the window. He measured the opening again, then dry-fit the used wooden frame he had cleaned the day before. The corner that had given him trouble was no longer a problem, because the new trim would cover it. He cut cedar strips to make the inner frame, their warm smell wrapping around him like a small forest. He used shims to keep the window square as he checked the bubble on his level. He said softly, "Let the bubble sit in the center," the way his teachers had once told him. Then he secured the frame with screws, checking each one, not rushing. When the glass slid into place and he turned the latch for the first time, a quiet click sounded like a promise. Sunlight fell through the clear pane and reached across the floor to the far wall, where dust danced in the beam. It made him smile, without trying. Next came insulation. He carried the rolls one by one from the corner and cut them to fit between the metal ribs of the container. He slipped on gloves, set a simple vapor barrier over the insulation, and then fastened thin furring, strips to hold everything tight. He worked with a steady rhythm. Measure, cut, fit, press, fasten. Measure, cut, fit, press, fasten. At first, the task felt slow. Then one panel of cedar went up and the space changed. The metal disappeared behind warm wood. He stepped back and felt his chest lift. He imagined the whole wall done. He imagined the sound of rain, softer against wood than against bare steel. By mid-morning, footsteps sounded at the door. It was the night shift neighbor, as promised. "I can hold boards," he said with a small smile, "but I am not good with angles." "Angles I can help with," Armand said, and they both laughed. Together, they lifted long cedar planks and set them on the furring strips. The neighbor held one end while Armand drove the small nails. They kept the lines straight, checking every few boards with a level. They did not speak much, but the work moved well because 4 hands can do what 2 hands struggle with. After an hour, they had finished half the wall. They took a break and sat on the bench of stacked boards. Armin poured tea into 2 old cups. He offered one to the neighbor, who took it and blew across the top. "It looks like a real room now," the neighbor said. "Not a metal box." "That is the plan," Armand said. "Permission paper still on the door?" the neighbor asked. "Yes," Armand said. "Site visit in a few days. I want to be ready." They finished the last planks before noon. The wall felt warm just to look at it. It also changed the sound. Inside the container, there was less echo, more softness. Armand ran his palm across the wood and felt the tiny ridges. He would sand it later and rub oil into the grain. For now, it was strong and steady. The sun was high now. It was the best window for the skylight. He climbed a small ladder and marked the roof opening, then checked his lines twice. He built a simple wooden frame around the marked square, on the inside of the roof, to keep strength in the metal after the cut. Then, with slow hands, he guided the grinder along the chalk, careful to keep the wheel true. The cutout panel lifted with a small lift of wind, and the sky looked down at him like a bright eye. He set the skylight in place, checked the fit, then lifted it again and ran butyl tape along the flange. He set it down once more, pressed, and drove the screws gently, not too tight, as Mr. Body had taught him. He ran a clean bead of sealant along the edge and smoothed it with a gloved finger. It looked tidy. It looked safe. He opened and closed the hinge. Easy. He stood on the ladder and let the new square of light fall on his face. He felt quietly, happy. By mid-afternoon, clouds moved in sooner than the radio had said. He looked up and saw a thin gray edge pushed by a fast wind. He moved quickly to add a simple gutter along the roof's low edge, with a short downspout guiding rain toward the ditch. He had pre-cut the pieces last night. He lifted them, clipped the brackets, and checked the slope. He secured a mesh screen where a small barrel would one day sit. He pressed sealant at the joint and gave it one last look. He knew weather could teach hard lessons if you were careless. He wanted to learn gently. Rain arrived in a burst, short and sharp. It drummed on the metal and the new skylight. He stood under the roof and listened. The water flowed to the gutter and then down the spout. For a moment, everything seemed perfect. Then he saw it. 3 dark drops formed at a seam near the far end of the roof, where an old metal joint had hidden a tiny gap. The drops fell. One landed on his new cedar floor and left a round mark. He moved fast. He set a cloth under the drip, climbed the ladder, and looked close. The seal at the joint had pulled away in one spot under the burst of rain. He dried the area with a towel, waited for the shower to pass, then pressed a patch of butyl tape over the joint and sealed its edges. He turned the skylight latch again, wiped the inside trim, and watched. No more drops formed. He breathed out, but he marked the joint in his notebook with a bright star. Check after the next rain. Check again after that. In the evening, he swept the floor and brought out his small sander. He tested a corner of the cedar wall. The grain woke under the paper. The color grew deeper, like warm tea. He smiled and wiped the dust with a clean rag. The room smelled like cedar and a little bit of rain, a gentle mix that felt close to peace. He turned on the box fan low to move the air and opened the new window a little to help. The next day brought new tasks and a sharp reminder that every improvement had a cost. He went to the store to buy a compact water filter for the sink area and a safe, small propane setup designed for indoor cooking when used with a vented line. The prices made his stomach dip. He stood in the aisle and calculated again. He could skip one of them and wait, but the inspection checklist was clear: safe water, safe cooking, and proper ventilation. He carried the boxes to the counter with careful fingers. When he reached the plot, he set everything on the floor and sat beside it. He felt the weight of the money he had spent. He looked around the room at the clean window, the warm wall, the new skylight, and the tidy gutter. He remembered something he had learned as an electrician. A safe system is not one part. It is all parts working together. He stood up and made a choice. He took a few old items, an extra drill he barely used, a radio, and a small stack of books, and listed them on a local board with fair, low prices. By evening, 2 items had sold. A student came for the radio and left a little thank you. "Note, this will help me study," he wrote. That gave Armand a small, quiet joy. He used the cash to buy a carbon monoxide alarm and an extra detector, both required. He liked the sound of the word required. In this case, it meant, "We want you safe." He installed the filter under the small sink frame he was building and ran the line cleanly along the wall. He placed the propane canister outside the container in a small vented box he made from scrap with a locking latch, then led a proper hose through a sealed pass-through. He triple-checked each fitting with soapy water and watched for bubbles. No bubbles formed. He took his time on this step. He did not want to rush where safety lived. That afternoon, Mr. Bhatti returned with his careful eyes and his warm cap. Together, they began the build that would change the space the most: a wall bed with storage. They measured the bed nook and planned a frame that would fold up into a clean cabinet during the day. They chose strong hinges and tested the movement with clamps before committing. They built a shallow cabinet with doors above the head of the bed for blankets and books. The two kids from the street stood at the doorway and watched the bed move up and down. Their eyes widened as the bed rose and clicked into place. "Magic," one whispered, and Armin laughed. They also built the long bench with lift-up lids, along one wall. Inside the bench, he stored tools and spare parts. On top, he placed a thin cushion he had found at the salvage yard. The bench became many things: a seat, a step, a place to think, and a calm line along the wall. Near the window, they fixed a slim bookshelf made from a piece of the old cut-out metal panel and two wood brackets. The mix of metal and wood looked honest, as if the container were telling its story through these little details. When Mr. Body left that evening, he pressed Armand's hand and said, "You worked with care today. That is why the bed lifts so smoothly. Care shows." Armand felt the words settle in a good place inside him. Over the next 2 days, Armand sanded the cedar walls lightly and rubbed a natural oil into the grain. He worked in small sections, letting the wood drink and then wiping the extra. The color deepened. The room looked warm, like late afternoon light, even when clouds covered the sun. He hung simple, cool running lights along the ceiling and wired them cleanly to the breaker box. He labeled each circuit by hand: lights, outlets, fan, alarm. He installed the detectors at the proper heights and tested their sounds. The beeps were sharp and a little rude, but he liked that they were not shy. In an emergency, you do not want shy. He brought in 2 plants in Badouesh. On the morning of the visit, Armin woke before the alarm. The air inside felt fresh and kind. A thin line of sun came through the new window and drew a pale square on the cedar wall. He made tea and stood quietly while steam rose from the cup. Today mattered, but he did not want to rush. He looked around the room in a slow circle. The bed folded up smooth. The fold-out table sat flat against the wall. The bench lids opened and closed without a sound. The breaker box was labeled in neat letters. The alarms were ready. The small plants lifted their leaves under the skylight. He felt steady. He checked his list and did the last small jobs. He set a simple handrail beside the doorstep and tightened its screws. He placed a clear cover plate on the breaker box and tested the latch. He wiped the window glass until it showed no streaks. He ran his finger along the seal at the skylight and felt a clean line. He poured a pitcher of water and set 2 cups on the fold-out table for guests. He put the conditional approval paper near the door where it was easy to see. He opened the small vent near the ceiling and turned the fan to its lowest setting, so air would move gently. A short while later, a car stopped by the curb. A person in a municipal jacket stepped out with a clipboard. It was the same man who had spoken about rules before, and with him came the woman from the office who liked clear plans. They greeted Armin with simple smiles. "We will walk through slowly," the man said. "We will look at exits, air, water, and safety. We will also check the roof work and the drain." The woman added, "We like what we saw on paper. Now, we want to see it here." They began at the door. The man checked the swing space and the handrail. He stepped inside and looked for the path to exit. "Clear and simple," he said. He looked up and saw the vent and the skylight. "Open, please," he said, and Armin lifted the latch. Fresh air moved across the room. The woman stood by the window and measured the opening. "Good size," she said. "Not too high. Easy to use if needed." They moved to the breaker. Box. The man read the labels and traced the wire from the box to an outlet. He pressed the test button on the ground fault outlet by the sink frame. It clicked and then reset. "Good," he said. They stepped outside to see the small propane box. Armin showed the vent holes and the lock. He pointed to the sealed pass-through and the proper hose. He mixed soapy water and brushed the fittings to show there were no bubbles. The woman nodded. "You took care here," she said. "Thank you." They walked to the back corner where the new gutter sent water to the downspout. A mesh screen sat on top of a small barrel, and a pipe led away from the barrel to the ditch. "The slope is correct," the man said, sighting along the line. "Keep the mesh clean when leaves fall." Armin wrote a note to himself right away. They climbed the small ladder to look at the skylight seal. The wind was calm. The screws sat even. The bead of sealant was neat. "Work like this saves trouble later," the woman said. "Do you check the joint after storms?" Armin smiled. "Yes. I write it in my book," he said. "I check again, after the next rain, too." The man laughed softly. "Very good," he said. "That is how to live in peace with a roof." Back inside, they looked at the interior wood. The cedar had a soft shine from oil, not glossy, just warm. The woman touched the fold-out table and lifted it. It moved smooth and settled flat. She lowered it again and looked at the hinges. "Nice," she said. They tried the wall bed. It rose with one hand and clicked into place. The man checked the latch and asked, "Is there a safety strap?" Armin showed a simple strap he had added to keep the bed secure when up. The man nodded and wrote a small note. "Good latch. Keep. Strap visible." For water, they checked the small filter under the sink frame. Armin ran clean water through it into a bowl and poured it away. "We will add a simple trap when the sink goes in," he said. "I have the part ready." The woman wrote, "Trap to be added," with a small smile. She looked at the alarms next. Smoke alarm, carbon monoxide alarm, both in place and tested. The beeps made all three flinch and then laugh in the same breath. "Strong sound," the man said. "That is what we want." They stood together by the door at the end of the list. The man and the woman spoke quietly with their heads close for a moment. Then the woman looked at Armin and said, "You did careful work. This follows the plan, and where you change small things, you did so for safety. We ask for one minor improvement. Add a small protective edge to the inside rim of the skylight, so heads do not find a sharp corner when the bed is up. Once you add that, you have full approval." The words felt like a soft bell ringing. Armin's shoulders eased. "I can do that today," he said. "I have trim already cut." The man smiled. "Then we will wait," he said. "We have time." Armin took out the thin trim and mitered the corners on a small box saw. He sanded each piece, set them in place around the inside edge, and fixed them with tiny nails. He ran a soft cloth over the line to make sure there were no sharp points. The woman ran her hand there too and nodded. "Done," she said. The man wrote a final line on the paper and handed it to Armin. At the top, it said approval. Under it, in neat print, it listed the simple rules he had already learned to live by. He took the paper like a person holds a gentle bird. For a moment, he did not speak. Then he said, "Thank you for being clear." And he meant it. As they stepped outside, two kids who often stopped by stood near the gate, trying to look casual. The night shift neighbor and his partner were across the street, waving. Mr. Bahati came slowly up the sidewalk with his cap and his bright eyes. The salvage yard owner drove up in a small truck and carried a little plant in a pot. "We heard today was the day," she said. "We brought a small gift for your light." Armin felt his throat tighten in a good way. He set the plant inside near the window, and it seemed to fit right away. People asked, "May we see?" And he opened the door wide. One by one, they stepped in and stopped. For a moment, no one talked. The warm cedar, the square skylight, the tidy lines, the bench with lift-up lids, the small shelf, the clean window with a view of trees, it all spoke for him. The kids whispered, "It smells nice." The neighbor's partner touched the bench cushion and said, "Soft." Mr. Bhatti looked at the bed latch and the trim and the table hinges. and said nothing at first. Then he said, "Care shows," in the same tone as before, and Armin knew that was the best praise he could get. The man who had once called out jokes came last. He held a small paper bag and stood in the doorway as if unsure. Armin waved him in. The man looked up at the skylight, down at the floor and around the room. "I was not kind on the first day," he said at last. "I am sorry. I did not know what you were building. I only saw the outside." He handed over the bag. Inside were sweet rolls with a little sugar on top. Armin thanked him and said, "You are welcome here. I am still learning too." The man nodded, relief in his eyes. Someone asked for a picture, and Armin agreed. The salvage yard owner took 2 photos on her phone, one of the skylight and cedar wall and one of the fold-out table set with 2 cups of tea. She posted them on a local community page with a short note. "Small space, big care, a lesson in doing more with less." By evening, messages arrived from people who wanted to learn how to build a shelf, or how to find safe salvaged wood, or how to read a simple wiring plan. Armin did not want to be a big teacher, but he could share what he knew. He wrote back politely and said he would host a small open box hour on Saturday to show basic steps. Saturday came with bright air and a calm line of clouds in the distance. Armin set the fold-out table up and placed simple tools on it. A tape measure, a square, a pencil, a chisel, a small saw, a drill with a safe bit, wire labels, and a smoke alarm in its box. He put a sign on the door. "Ask anything. Please be safe." Mr. Body stood beside him with a steady smile. The night shift neighbor brought a tray with tea and small cups. The 2 kids held a measure at one end while grown-ups practiced, marking a straight line on a board. People laughed in a kind way, the kind that makes space for others. He showed how to sight a board to see if it was true. He showed how to mark a stud line so a panel would land clean. He explained why a ground fault, outlet near water, is a friend. He told them to always ask the office about rules before they cut the first line. He said, "A plan is not a fence. It is a map." He could see the idea land in a few faces. He felt grateful to the office for being clear, and to Mr. Body for sharing old tools and quiet wisdom. He thanked them both out loud so others would hear. Near the end of the hour, his phone buzzed. It was his mother. He stepped outside and answered. He told her the news in a soft voice. "Approved," he said. "It is safe and calm." She laughed in relief and said she would send a small photo from her kitchen, the one where she was, making tea and smiling at the camera. "Put it on your shelf," she said, "so I can sit in your light." He promised he would. When the photo arrived later, he printed it at a small shop and slid it into a frame from the salvage yard. Placed it on the spice shelf they had made as a test, and it looked like it had always belonged. In the week that followed, he worked on the outside. The inside was now a calm heart. The outside could be kinder too. He sanded the worst rust on the skin of the container, brushed on treatment, and rolled on a coat of primer. The color turned from tired red to quiet gray. Then he chose a final color that matched the cedar inside, a soft war.